Welcome to the National History Day Insider Tips webinar on the paper category. My name is Vinia Boland, and I'm the state coordinator for the National History Day in Iowa program. And today we're going to be discussing how to write a paper for the paper category. A paper is a traditional form of presenting historical research. Various types of creative writing, for example, fictional diaries, poems, etc., are permitted, but the most conform to all general and category rules. Your paper should be grammatically correct and written well. A paper is highly personal and an individual effort, and if you prefer to work alone, this may be the best category for you. Papers depend almost entirely on words to tell the story, and you can usually include more information in a paper than in some of the other categories. All right, joining us today to discuss the paper category is Luke Horton and Shannon from Harding Middle School. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here. Luke, we'll start with you. If you can introduce yourself and share with us how long you've been participating in National History Day.
Hi, I am Luke Horton, and I've been participating in National History Day since 6th grade.
Fantastic. And you were a national qualifier just this past summer. How was that experience for you?
It was definitely surprising. It felt really good to get to nationals. It really just proved that I can do certain things, and wow, I just messed up. I don't have a script or anything.
No, that's totally fine. We can edit all of this. So really, we just want to hear from you, your experience. Like, was this the first time you ever did History Day?
No, so this was the third time I've done History Day, and I just kind of, I can't find the right words to say.
That's okay. So this was not your first time doing History Day, but have you done a different category, or have you always stuck with paper?
I've always stuck with paper, and I just like it because it's super simple and it's traditional, and I like working alone. So being able to do a paper alone, I don't have to rely on other people, and I can do all my ideas, and I can do everything I want to do.
That's awesome. So if another student came to you and said that they were looking at writing a paper for History Day, what would you advise them to think about before writing the paper? Is there anything that you wish you would have told yourself before you got involved in this category?
Definitely always consider the fact that you're going to be alone. That means that you're going to have to do more work by yourself. It means that you're going to have less motivation to not procrastinate. It's really easy to procrastinate when you're working by yourself because without teammates to push you to do your work, it has to all come from inside you. And so that can be really hard at times.
Exactly. Those are great
Also,
points.
if you also want to do a paper, make sure it's how you want to do it. Every person really knows like what's best for them, and don't feel forced to do a paper for any reason whatsoever. If you feel like it's the better way to do something, just do whichever type of project you want to do.
That's great. Thank you so much, Luke. And Shannon, as the National History Day teacher, what should other teachers be aware of when their students are working on a paper? Do you have any advice for teachers who are new to the paper category?
I think, the biggest thing is to remember that they also need structure in place for them to be successful. They need things broken down. The paper is overwhelming. And the tendency, well, I mean, all of them in National History Day are kind of overwhelming, but the tendency is for kids to write more of a traditional report and then kind of run out of gas when it comes to those most critical end pieces about the significance and the impact and drawing conclusions from all of that. And that's a weaker area for them naturally, mainly because of age and so forth. So getting them to a point where they can see that is very important, but structuring it along the way, similarly to what you do with all the other categories when you ask kids to set up where's your context, where's your background, where's your buildup, like your heart of the story or your main focus on what's happening, Where's your short-term consequences, your long-term things? Where is your significance? And helping them see those, and especially those other parts that require more analysis, are different than writing a traditional report.
That's great. Thank you both so much. So a couple things before you start with the paper category. You want to ask yourself the following questions. So as Luke stated, this is a solo project. So do you feel comfortable working alone, and can I keep myself on track? Would I enjoy writing a paper, and do I have assistance editing my paper? So is there somebody that can take a look at your paper after your first draft, after your second, third, etc., that can give you some feedback, some pointers, and maybe some edits? You also want to consider, is writing a paper the best way to showcase my topic? Is there another category that best showcases my topic and how it makes a connection to the theme? So those are a couple things you want to think about before you get started. The paper process. So we're going to go over a couple of the steps it takes to write an actual National History Day paper. So first, you're going to conduct your research. So we're going to examine secondary and primary sources. We're going to take careful notes, and we're going to keep track of where each piece of information is coming from. So from your research, you should come up with your thesis, the argument you want to make in your paper. So this was a rule change in 2021, but National History Day does want students to outline their historical argument in the process paper. So you want to make sure right at the beginning, once you're researching, you want to determine what argument you want to make in your project and start working on your thesis statement. Next, you want to make an outline. Using your notes, you can create a list of the main points you want to include in your paper, where each piece of information will go, and in what order. This will help when you sit down and start to write your paper. So Luke, a question I have for you is, when you start researching, how do you organize your information? Do you keep it in a Google Doc, a spreadsheet? And what advice would you have for other kids on how they can organize their research?
So basically, with every source that I find and that I use, I usually start with just simple secondary articles and stuff to get the big picture of what happened. And once I do that, I put all my sources down on like a Google sheet or a Google Doc. And then once it comes time to write the paper, I put jot dots of all the big ideas that I want to put, using the information that I got from those sources and other sources. And then after that, I start filling in more and more details, and then I wrap it all up.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So after we've made that outline, we're going to actually start writing the paper. You might begin by writing your introduction, in which you state your thesis. So there's 3 sections to a paper. There is first the introduction. So your introduction should tell the reader where you intend to go with the rest of your paper. The middle, or the body, the main body of your paper, is where you can make the case for your conclusion and present your evidence, the primary sources, and your analysis of how they support your thesis. The conclusion, or the last piece, your conclusion is like the summary of your paper. It should summarize your main points that you prove your thesis. So Luke, I just want to check with you. Do you agree with these 3 sections, or is there a different strategy you use? And what do you think is the most important part to start working on right in the beginning?
I think this is definitely the way you want to go. It's the easiest way to keep everything organized. And what you want to start working on first is you want to make sure that you can write a good summary of the story, and then you can separate like the historical argument, and then you can put that in after you've already determined what it is. Just start writing about the story, and then put everything else in there after you've already determined how you're going to do that.
That's great. And another question I've had for you, because I've heard of other students talk about developing research questions and then answering those in their paper. Do you do something similar, or do you develop your historical argument and try to prove that?
I don't have research questions. I kind of just find an argument, and then I kind of just write my paper and I try to find ways to implement that into my paper. Like, if that means I'll write a paragraph about how something proves my historical argument because, or something like that.
That's great. Thank you so much. So the last piece we're going to talk about is the reading and revising. So a polished product takes time. So it's important to reread and revise your paper. You want to check for clarity, unity, and coherence. It is clear how your, is it clear how your topic relates to the National History Day theme? Does your conclusion flow logically with your thesis? So I did want to ask both of you how you go about the revising process. Do you have deadlines to where Luke needs to turn in his paper to review it? Is it something that you work with other classmates on? Shannon, can you maybe give us some insight into how you're, and maybe to show other teachers the best way to revise a student project?
Well, I guess the first part that really helps me stay on top of where they are, but not specifically in their projects, is I do require them to write a certain number of annotations every week that I can grade. And that gives me just a glimpse of what's going on. And then within that, as I talked about before, I have those structures about where are you on your heart of the story? Where are you on your context? Show me those particular details or events, or even if it happens to be a exhibit, show me the actual picture you think you're going to use on your project. So in a paper, yes, I still have some of those deadlines, guidelines for my paper students, especially those starting out. I would say for Luke this year, after doing it 2 other years, that idea of keeping himself on track was something more that he owned rather than me having to set up specific deadlines for him. But I certainly do that for the kids who've never done it before, and the kids who are just less experienced than he is.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, and now we're going to dive into the contest rules. Historical papers must be between 1,500 to 2,500 words. The following words do count in the paper, which would be text that the student writes, including captions and words and footnotes, endnotes, internal documentation other than the citation, quotes from any sources, whether they are primary or secondary. So words that do not count in the paper would be the title page, process paper, annotated bibliography, so the footnotes, endnotes, internal documentation, citations, and the annotated bibliography, primary source materials, and dependencies. So Luke, I just want to touch base with you on these rules too. Is there any rule that the paper student should really keep an eye on throughout their process? Such as watching that word count, or have you experienced any difficulties with keeping in the word count, and what were some strategies you used to make sure that you were abiding by contest rules?
Yeah, I think the word count was probably the biggest one, and I was mainly able to keep that under control by, I would start by writing something very concise, and then I would add on to it. So then I didn't start at 4,000 words and then have to chop it down to 2,500. I could start out at maybe 2,000 and then still have 500 excess words that I could do to add to my historical argument or to better explain the story or whatever. And I definitely think the biggest part of remembering the rules is reading the rule book. You should always read the rule book and then read it again. You want to make sure you memorize almost everything in it, and then once you are writing your paper and annotated bibliography and process paper, you always want to make sure that if you're even questioning that it's against the rule book, always just check back to make sure that you're not making a mistake. Because if you are, it could penalize you, and that could be the difference between making it to state or nationals or not.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That is a great point. So we're going to talk a little bit about using an appendix. And I've had questions about this over the years, so I just wanted to highlight this area. So an appendix contains supplementary material that is not essential part of the text itself, but may be helpful in providing a more comprehensive understanding of the research paper or its information that is too cumbersome to be included in the body of the paper. So the key point is to remember when including an appendix, it is the information that the information is not essential. If it were removed, the reader would still be able to comprehend the historical significance and impact of your topic. So in the History Day rule book, it does say that this material must be referenced in the text of the paper. Use of appendices should be very limited and may include photographs, maps, charts, or other graphs. So Luke, I just wanted to ask if you had ever created one of these for your papers or for any other project, and if there's any other additional tips or advice you have for students.
I did create an appendix in 8th grade, but I didn't in 6th or 7th. I think you shouldn't really feel forced to do an appendix, but if you want to, make sure, first of all, that you're looking at the word count, because the words that you use in the explanation or summary of the picture or whatever it is, those do count to your words. And so always make sure that. And second of all, in order to create my appendix, there wasn't a very specific example or way to do it that the rulebook explained. I don't know if that'll change or not. So I just looked at the winner from last year's NHD contest, and that's actually what I did for a lot of this stuff in my paper.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
That I wasn't doing anything wrong.
Yeah, that's a very good idea to take a look at other resources such as examples from previous years. And I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on inserting photographs or other graphs into the paper? For example, when you're working on a topic and you find different photographs that connect to your topic, how do you know which ones to select to put in your appendix?
I just chose the ones that I had already made points about, things similar to what was happening. Like, for example, in part of my background section, I was talking about Nazi propaganda, and I was able to find this picture of discriminatory images of Jews and stuff. So I put that in the appendix and then cited my claims with the appendix and the image and the source that I was using it from. So really only use the pictures or whatever they are if you're already talking about something similar to what they mean in your text. Don't feel forced to write a new paragraph or section because you want to add a picture. Don't force it.
That's great advice. Don't force it. Thank you, Luke. So we're going to touch on citing the paper and in the annotated bibliography. So both of these styles here are allowed with the National History Day program. So the first one is the Modern Language Association, better known as MLA, or the Chicago Manual of Style, or Chicago Style. So MLA, this style is typically used for papers on English subjects, and they use in-text citations. It is pretty popular in middle school age level and in lots of all the other categories. But what I've seen more preferred in papers is the Chicago style. But once again, both citation styles are allowed in any National History Day project. So Chicago style is used frequently for history subjects. It uses footnotes where the citation is placed at the bottom of the page. It also uses endnotes where the citations are placed at the end of the paper on a separate page. And Luke, I'd have to look back at your paper to see which one you used, but could you let us know which style you prefer and why you think that style works better for you in your papers?
I prefer the Chicago Manual style, and I think, first of all, not having to add an in-text citation to the word count is pretty, not having to go around that whenever you're trying to get your word count is it's a lot simpler because it doesn't count all the words that you put in the end note. So it's kind of, I just preferred the simple, the numbers, it doesn't look messy. I just thought it was easier and a lot simpler.
That's great. And we have a lot of students who not only are they new to History Day, but they might be really new to having to cite resources. Do you have any advice or tips for students who are just getting into citing sources to help make it a little bit easier for them to understand or learn how to cite? Is there a certain resource you used to train yourself how to cite sources, or did you just collect them through a Google Doc and when you had time tried to cite them? Or what advice would you have to other students getting started?
For things like this, I kind of learned these in 6th grade, because that's really when we started focusing more on evidence and stuff.
Mhm.
So there are a few tools that we learned that can definitely help you. One's like this race strategy. It means reclaim, answer, cite your evidence, and explain your evidence. And although the NHD format isn't exactly like that, it kind of just provides an outline of how you should cite the evidence, but you'll have to learn more about the actual race strategy in order to do that. And there's like other ways too, um, that can help you learn how to cite evidence.
That's great. So when you're writing your paper, do you usually have a separate document where you put all of your resources? And if you do that, when do you start writing your annotations for those resources?
I do have a separate page where I put all my resources, because if you don't have that, it's going to be really tough to have a paper full of words except not have any sources to back that up.
Mhm.
Uh, so definitely keep track of your sources that you're using. And I also do the annotations as I find the sources. In my class, the we had to do 5 annotations a week for the first 7 weeks, I think. So it's like a minimum of 35. And so I kind of got over the years, I kind of got into the process of annotating as I was finding the sources. And then it was much easier to organize, and it was much easier to uh, find the sources that I was trying to use and cite them better.
That's great. Those are great tips. Thank you so much. And required written material in addition to the paper. So it is an official rule change in 2021 that all papers in the paper category need to have a process paper in addition to the actual paper. So the process paper, you need to define how your topic relates to the National History Day theme. You need to explain your historical argument, and you need to explain why you chose the paper category and what you did to create your project. For the annotated bibliography, you need to provide a list of sources that contributed to your research and organized by primary and secondary sources. Needs to include a source of visual, audio material, and oral interviews. Bundle photos or other materials from the same collection in a single citation. And annotations must explain how you use the source. So just as Luke mentioned, a great tip when you're pulling sources is to go ahead and write a couple sentences on where you found the source, why you want to use it, and how it connects to your topic or to your argument so that you can later go back and make edits. All right, Luke and Shannon, I just want to touch base with you and see if you have any additional tips or advice for students, or if you have any advice for those who are just getting started in the National History Day program.
So with the process paper that you just mentioned, I thought a lot of kids might not know this. The process paper is pretty simple, and if you take more than 3 hours writing the rough draft, you are worrying about it way too much. Obviously, it should take more time to edit and add it to your paper, except don't stress about that too much. You already have the answers just simply by already writing the paper. And I also think another tip is to never, I think I already said this, but never procrastinate, especially with the paper. um, Time is very limited. You have to do a lot of work. You have to do it in less time than other kids because you have to get it submitted uh, in person. And you really only have a few weeks to really write your paper and edit after you've already gained a full understanding of the topic. So please, it's going to be so much easier if you just don't procrastinate.
That's great advice. Thank you, Luke. And Shannon, do you have any advice or tips for teachers who are just getting started in the National History Day program?
It's exciting. It's wonderful. Enjoy it. Go on a journey with the kids. Often they'll come up with content and ideas and topics that you really have no understanding of. And sometimes you have to do a little work in order to assist them, to advise, to question, to ask them all the whys when they present their ideas to them. If you don't know some of that information, it's kind of hard to have that discussion. But it's exciting to see what they come up with. In terms of structurally teaching it, Luke mentioned the annotations, and all my kids do their annotations right away when they do their citation and annotation. But we do a lot of classroom demonstration of how to write the citations. We do a lot of classroom demonstration about how do you structure the annotation, so that everybody has a really good understanding of how that works. And in terms of the editing of a paper, I harken back to long ago language arts kinds of things where I asked the students to read it out loud to me rather than reading it independently. When they hear themselves say the sentences and the words, they realize themselves what edits need to be made and how things need to change. The other thing I have them do is highlighting. If you have a topic and you start highlighting the different pieces of your work and find out that red and blue are mixed together in the same paragraph, that needs to change. A couple of other things is, again, a lot of structure on how to write that thesis, and realizing that as they do further research, it's kind of hard to write a thesis at the beginning, but as they do further research, that thesis will change. And that's okay to have that modified based on the findings that they are discovering through their research. So.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Those are some great tips that teachers can use. Thank you. All right. And for all categories, in addition to the paper category, we do have additional assistance for students. So there are more Insider Tips webinar series. These are webinars on different subjects related to National History Day. So not just on the categories, but we'll be talking about the historical argument, primary, secondary sources, and the research process. So please make sure to check on the webinar series, Insider Tips. We also have Ask a Librarian, where if you need help looking for a resource on your topic, or if you have specific questions that you would like to talk with a librarian about, you can submit a request. Or there's the mentorship program, where you can get paired with an NHD alumni to receive feedback before a district level contest. All of these great opportunities and additional assistance are on the National History Day in Iowa Getting Started webpage, and that is the link down here below. And if you have any additional questions, not just about the paper category, but about National History Day, feel free to reach out to me. This is my email and my phone number, or you can visit iowaculture.gov/NHD. And I just want to pause here and say thank you so much to Shannon and Luke for taking the time to share their experiences and to give us some extra tips.
My pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.